Morning, Monco. As we're about to partake in communion, or breaking the bread as we refer to it, I'd ask you to go to the book of Matthew. Matthew chapter 14. I'm going to be starting at verse 22, reading through to verse 27. So Matthew 14, 22 through 27. Now that address might not sound, very familiar, but the account certainly will, because this is Jesus walking on water. And certainly even people in the world know that. I mean, they may mock it and not believe it, but they know it's in the Bible somewhere. So as you're going to Matthew 14 there, we're just going to read there and get an understanding of really what's the heart of that text and see how it's related to what we're going through today. So let's take a look. Matthew chapter 14, starting at verse 22, I'm reading from the New King James Version of the Bible, and the word of the Lord reads as follows. Immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he sent the multitudes away. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. Now when the evening came, he was alone there, but the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. Now in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went to them walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, as saying, "It is a ghost." And they cried out for fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Be of good cheer. It is I. Do not be afraid." Do not be afraid. Certainly a very relevant statement now. I saw a commercial yesterday on CNN where they were thanking all the emergency personnel, all those essential personnel for, as they said, going into the storm. And they showed police officers and medical personnel and all the people, paramedics. And I thought about it. And that certainly is what really pointed me to going to this text when they mentioned that term of the storm. And those people who are just like my sister, a respiratory therapist, just like my sister-in-law, my wife's sister, a police officer, they're certainly in the heart of the storm. But you know what? We're all in a storm in some kind of way because of this coronavirus. A lot of us are really going through. About 2.5 weeks ago, I got a text. My wife and I got a text from my daughter, Charity, who's a senior in high school. And in that text, she was telling us about the email that they had just received telling the students all of these events and activities that were being canceled. Everything from prom to graduation to class trip, sports in the spring, even winter sports where they were about to participate in the state championship, canceled, gone. And certainly that affects us personally. But it was like on that day, it was a snowball effect because that evening, the first NBA player tested positive. And that subsequently led to the league canceling its season. I should say suspending its season. And I know they hope to come back. But so many things started happening. Colleges started sending students home immediately. Some couldn't even get to the dorms to get their belongings. Tom Hanks announced that night that he and his wife had been tested positive for corona. And it was like a snowball effect that if you ever doubted it, it was almost like a wake-up call. If you ever thought that, are they really kind of maybe exaggerating this thing, blowing it out of proportion? It was the kind of slap in the face that corona was here and it was going to dramatically change our lives. So here we are, 3.5 weeks later. And now we're doing church online. We're quarantined. Hospitals are bursting at the seams. And people are doubtful, uncertain, anxious, flat out afraid. It relates so much to what the disciples were going through in that account, because in that account that I read, they're right after the feeding of the 5,000. The multitudes are coming around them. Jesus knows, I have to get my disciples out of here. So he puts them in the boat, tells them to go ahead of him. He goes up to the mountain to pray. As it gets later in the night, it talks about how the waves were just tossing them around, how the wind was contrary against them, and how at the fourth watch is 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. So they've been out there a long time. When those winds are tossing them, the word that Matthew chooses to use there in the Greek means torture. They're being tortured, slammed by the waves, wind, probably water pouring into the boat. They've been out there a long time. They're tired. They're frustrated. And then to top all that, what is that out there on the water? A ghost. And they terrified. They scream in terror. And then Jesus comes closer and has to reassure them, be of good courage, be of good cheer. It is I. Do not be afraid. Now, why didn't they recognize Jesus? See, somebody on the surface might say, well, of course they didn't recognize him. Who is expecting to see some man walking out there in the water, right? But that's not what it's about. Because as Jesus gets closer to him, he still has to let him know who he is. You know why they don't recognize him? Because they're so caught up and so overwhelmed by everything that's going on around them. The waves, the wind, the water, the darkness, that they can't see that Jesus is right there with them. So consumed about everything going on, so overwhelmed by this news swell, so into what are they saying online now, so engulfed by what we're hearing that we can't realize that God is right in the midst of us. Jesus has to identify himself. On the surface, you read through it and he says courage. In the Greek, that's the word tharseo. It means courage. But then he says, it is I, and that means ego eimi in the Greek. That's I am. Hear what he's saying. Courage. Why? Because I am. He's saying to his disciples, not only am I not up in that mountain anymore, I'm here with you. But think about who I really am. I am. I'm the one who spoke to Moses at the burning bush. And all these financial, everything, upheaval, we'll just call it. He's saying, I am your provider. I am Jehovah Jireh. I am Yahweh Yireh. Don't worry. Don't have any anxiety about this. I got you. The coronavirus seems so overwhelming, but you know what? I am Jehovah Rapha, your healer. And as hard as it might be to fathom, I'm bigger than corona. If you're stressed out, if you're anxious, like a lot of us are, if you're anxiety ridden, for whatever reason, man, I don't know what's going to happen at work. I love these kids, but man, they're driving me crazy at home. I thought I really wanted to be alone. These people got on my nerves, but now I'm all alone. If you're anxious about any of those kind of things, know that he is Jehovah Shalom. He is your peace. Don't evaluate God by the circumstances. Evaluate these circumstances by the bigness of who God is. And then you transfer that fear into faith in him, into the one who is your savior, the one who died on the cross for you, the one who's not going to leave you now, the one who is with you, the one who is the great I am. Take that with you as we prepare for the elements for communion. God bless.